Welcome to Ceasefire, where civics meets civility and engagement meets empowerment. Ceasefire is hosted by former Boerne ISD trustee and owner of the Boerne Bookshop, Dale Adams, and by former Boerne City Council member and local insurance agent, Ron Cisneros.
Welcome to Ceasefire, brought to you by the Boerne Bookshop. My name is Dale Adams.
And I'm Ron Cisneros.
And today we are going to talk about men pursuing purpose in their masculinity. And there's been a lot of trends going on in America lately about that.
Yes, there have. And I'm going to start with one that I found very interesting. And this was published in the New York Post. Oh, gosh, this was last year sometime. Actually, it was December 3rd, 2024. There it is. So this article was talking about the growth in the Eastern Orthodox Church. It's one of the fastest growing denominations in the United States, which is surprising to me because you barely hear about it anymore. And they interviewed several men, and what was driving this growth, and it was mostly among young men, by the way, men in their 20s and 30s, is that these men were seeking purpose. They were seeking traditional values. They found fault with evangelical and mainline Protestant churches. They felt they were too wishy-washy in their values, and they didn't really stand for anything. And so they found the rituals of the Orthodox Church and the tradition to be satisfying. And I thought that was interesting. As I was reading that article in that time frame last year, and this, keep in mind, this is during the election and all that, I kept seeing these other trends where I saw this shift in men to the right. And we saw it in white men, we saw it in black men, we saw it in Latino men, we saw it in Asian men. There was this poll after poll kept showing that these guys were moving, and I don't want to say towards Trump. Trump was just the representative of the Republican Party, but moving to the right, if you will. And I thought that was fascinating. That we should dive into that and find out why that's happening.
I don't know if we can necessarily find out why, because we can't analyze every man in America. But I do feel that it's a reaction to what's been going on over the last, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, which has basically been to reduce the amount of masculinity in men, basically. It's the cultures minimize the value of the father or of being what we would traditionally call a masculine person. And I think it's gotten to the point where men are saying, you're pushing it down, but I've got some of that and I need to express it somehow. And I think this is swinging back the other way from the men, not necessarily from other people, but from the men.
There are some black, I don't know what you'd call them, influencers or podcast people that I follow on Instagram and YouTube. And it's interesting because they'll talk about the Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, and they talk about how that basically killed the need for black men.
Yeah.
And so they lost their purpose. They weren't needed anymore as anything more than a sperm donor.
They were told they weren't needed, yes,
and
repeatedly.
Their role as a father, their role as a provider was diminished now.
Yep.
All they were was just a basket of seed.
Yeah.
And so there's this movement among black men now to find their purpose, to say, okay, no, we have a value beyond just being a child support payment. And again, I see this trend over and over again, and some guys are more vocal about it. Others, here's an interesting opinion piece that was written January 31st of this year, and this was in the Wall Street Journal, and this showed, now, actually, I'm going to go back and give you a little history. Pre-election, George Clooney had an advertisement. I don't know if you remember this, but he was telling women it's okay to not disclose your vote to your boyfriends or husbands. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
But it's like, go ahead and vote for Harris, but you don't have to tell anybody what you did, right? What happens in the booth stays in the booth. This study, actually, and this was a Harris Axios poll, and this was done in October of last year, and this showed that men were more likely than women to hide their vote from their significant others. In other words, they didn't want to tell their ladies that they were voting for Donald Trump.
And I think that came out when suddenly all the swing states went for Trump, and all these people who hadn't been telling others about how they were going to vote voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Instead of the way people thought they were going to vote.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
I did too.
Yeah.
And again, so what's driving that? Why? And I think you touched on it. I think it's decades, 50, 60 years of, hey, ladies, you don't need guys.
Yeah.
And guys, you're nothing more than child support.
Yeah.
And you've had too much privilege.
Yeah. And it goes everywhere. You look at all the old sitcoms, and who's the goofball? It's the guy.
It's the guy. It's the dad.
The dad is never the upstanding leader of the right thing. He's always having to be shown what's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had a few in the 80s at Huxtable.
Yeah, early time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the most part, even in commercials today, dad's the doofus, mom does everything.
Yeah.
And dad's just beer swizzling, out in the man cave, not productive, and
right,
basically worthless as anything more than a sperm donor.
So our culture still promotes that view, and I think this is a pushback against that.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if Hollywood and all the ad agencies would realize that and would start to promote masculinity as in a positive light.
Dale, what do you think masculinity is? How would you define it?
Okay, I've used this story before, and it's okay. I'll start off with saying it's really hard because everybody has masculinity and femininity and childishness and adultness. Everybody has components of any type of behavior you want to talk about. But do you remember the movie American Sniper? I just told you this a while ago. At the very beginning, there's the two boys are sitting at the table, and their dad told them that there are three types of people. There are the sheep, and then there are the wolves, and then there are the sheep dogs. And the sheep dogs are the ones who stand up when the wolves come around. And for me, masculinity, the core of masculinity is that you stand up and you become a sheepdog when it becomes necessary. Now, it maybe not for your whole life. And it may not be something physical. It may be just saying, okay, I'm going to go speak to the manager of this restaurant because something went wrong. The man does that. And that, for me, is what's masculine. He steps up when it's uncomfortable. And when I raise my kids, I think it's important for people to understand loss. And whenever we had a funeral, I would take my kids up to view the body. And some people I told that to didn't think that was right. And I was like, no, they need to understand that your Aunt Gracie is passed away. And their kids were young, but we did that. And I did that. I talked to my wife. We discussed it ahead of time. But I'm the one that actually took them up there to do the viewing. And I think taking that uncomfortable lead for the team of the family team is a masculine role. And so I think that's where I see as being masculine. And that can play out in a lot of different ways.
Let's bring a lady into this.
Hello.
Hello.
I am here.
It's so unfair of me to call on you, and I had you only find out the day of. This is what we're talking about today, and
It's fun. I like it.
all right. So, what do you think about masculinity?
I agree with the analogy from American Sniper for sure. When it comes to masculinity, if I ever have a son, I want to raise him to where he can stand up for himself, but also be comfortable in his own skin to where it's okay to still be emotional or have feelings, but you have to stand your ground and be that leader of your future family, be the leader of quote unquote your pack of people. And I feel like that has definitely have taken a step back in today's age, especially in my generation. Being just under 30, that generation struggles with that.
Yeah. I think your point about you can still be emotional and have all kinds of other feelings and endeavors is well taken, because masculinity is not about how you feel or what your interests are. It's more about, I don't even know the best term, just
I think it's how you present yourself and how you handle yourself.
and how you handle yourself.
Yeah.
Do you think, as a woman, do you think that a masculine figure poses a threat to you in terms of your autonomy or your equality?
No. I don't know if it's because I'm the worst person to ask, because I always tell my husband, I was like, I'm the most unfeminist person and I'm a female, but it's to have a great structure in a family, you need to have both sides. They always put down our throats when I was a child that you are a woman, you are independent, you don't need anyone in your life. You may not need them, but you want to have that unit. You strive on a good family unit altogether. And so I do not take offense that my husband is the breadwinner of the family. I do not take offense that he helps me when I need it, and I help him when he needs it. And honestly, I see as more masculine that he comes to me and says, hey, I do need this help, and I can be there for him. And he's not afraid to express that he needs help in certain departments that he might not be the biggest strength in that. And that's where I would come in. I think that is an equal 50-50 in my eyes, compared to either relying all the pressure on him, which is not fair to the male in the relationship or in the family unit. I don't think that's right. I think the females have to do their own, keep their part and do their part in the family. But that also doesn't make me feel like it's taking away the rights of myself or makes me feel little.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions of masculinity that's developed over, I don't know, hundreds of years, is that power and control is masculine. And whereas really it's not. It's the leadership and it's the support and the protection that are the masculine attributes. And I think that a lot of the pushback has come from believing that it's just about controlling each other or controlling others and having power over others. Mm-hmm. And it's not. I'll give my relationship as a prime example. My wife is the breadwinner. I stayed home with the kids. But if you look at our family, I am definitely the masculine one, and Jay is very feminine. And it's not about power or control over each other. But like I said earlier, we discuss things and we agree on some concept or something that we're going to do. But I will take the lead a lot of times on certain things, especially things that are uncomfortable, like showing kids their passed away family members. And so the masculine side of the family doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what we traditionally think it might do.
Yeah, and I think that comes too from all these bad ideas come from the way we've tried to water down genders and say there are more than two. And
I think it started earlier than that, though.
I would agree with that. I mean, but I think that's a big part of why it's really that idea has flourished today.
Yeah.
Is that we don't want to accept that there are differences in the two sexes. And in the Christian church, we talk a lot about complementarianism. It's always a hard word for me to get out. But the suggestion is that it's not that one is greater than the other, but that they're different and they complement each other. They're built for one another. It's not this idea that the guy's stronger. Physically, yes. Of course, he doesn't have to squeeze a baby out, but incapable of doing some of the things that women can do. Vice versa. There are things that women can do that men cannot do. And they're very good at telling us when we need to take a commercial break.
Yes, yes. And with that note, we're going to take a quick break here. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. We'll be right back. Boerne has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Boerne Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Boerne Bookshop. We pride ourselves on finding what you are looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Boerne Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Boerne at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Boerne Bookshop. Welcome back to Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, brought to you by the Boerne Bookshop. And Ron, you were just talking about the complementariness of men and women. And I think that is a huge key, because even though we can't necessarily define what's the masculine thing or the feminine thing or how much of one or the other everybody's supposed to have, there is a certain complementariness about men and women in the way that they function together. Not just the physical aspects, but just behaviorally and relationship-wise, that makes each one, I don't even know what it is, but they're not the same.
No. And this is where we bring up the evil T word, tradition. So, men in their traditional roles and women in their traditional roles. And by that, I'm not talking about women not being able to vote and they got to stay home and do the laundry. That's not what we're saying here, but just in their traditional roles as a woman and a man. As a woman is a feminine woman and a man is a masculine man. They complement each other. And when they try and deviate from that, they don't. So I thought, okay, let's solve this.
Good luck.
Let's find out what do women want, right? And so I get on Google and I type, what do women want? And
You have a wife, right?
Yeah.
You can just ask.
Yeah. I don't want that answer from her, though. I would be outside mowing right now, fixing the yard, fixing this, fixing that. I was like,
That's what they want.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we flipped roles in our lives. My wife's the breadwinner. I stayed home with the kids. I mow the lawn. I take out the garbage. So there are certain roles that don't change.
That don't change. Yes, Jordan Peterson likes to talk about how when somebody talks about breaking the glass ceiling for women, it's like, oh, it's always you want to be a CEO or you want to be an elected official. You never want to go and like pitch tar on a roof or do road construction.
That's a glass ceiling there. Yeah. Break the glass ceiling and get to the tar roof.
That's right. So I Googled. Oh my gosh, I had so many results, but things that women want from men. And I chose two in particular because they were very similar, but written from two different women. One is a very young columnist. No official study. No, this is just her opinions on what women want. And then the other one was written by an actual PhD, a psychologist. And what I found fascinating is that they were both saying the same thing. One that went and paid a bunch of money to get a degree, only to end up writing what the other one, who's probably getting no money at all and has a basic journalism degree from somewhere. But we're getting the same results. But I'm going to bring Lexi in again.
Here I am.
Our unpaid woman.
She's the only one in this room, I think, that's getting paid.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I make sure that you guys sound good.
Oh, well, thank you.
You do a great job with that.
We appreciate it. See, and that's you and your complimentary role supporting the men.
Of course.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Here, and this one's from the PhD, and she says that the first thing is that women want traits of moral integrity. They want open communication, honesty, trust and trustworthiness. They want men to take responsibility, and they want us to be kind, patient, understanding, empathetic, and compassionate. Would you agree with that?
So a decent human being. Yes.
Let me ask you a question.
Now, but that could apply to men and women. Men want that in their women also.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So here's my big $1 million question for you. And all the stuff that I got to prepare for the show, I also read that women don't want us to be traditional. And in fact, that is, somewhere in here, but it's basically they don't want us enforcing these outdated gender roles. And they don't want us listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson, and we're not supposed to listen to Joe Rogan or like Donald Trump or any of these things, okay?
Go to church.
They go to church. So where am I supposed to get these values? And I'm saying you, but I know you're not this way. But
right.
if you as a woman tell me, I don't want you listening to these people or going to church or doing any of this stuff, where would I find moral integrity and honesty and open communication and those ideas?
That's hard because, like you said, that's not me. To me, it sounds like these females want their cake and want to eat it too. They want a certain thing, but they don't want another part that would go with it. Personally, I would, if it was on my side of things, I would just tell the male to, unfortunately, I think you need to find women in a different area or find someone that is more to your standard of, you want to find someone that is on the same wavelength, politics-wise, the same ideals, same religion, or at least faith base, because that's where you find the true partnership with it all. But I see a lot of females who want a certain thing, but then they also want the man to vote for Harris. But the ideals just don't match together. And so they get upset when they do date people who are leaning towards a certain direction, but they don't have those ideals. It's the same thing. You want your cake and you want to eat it too, and that's just not how that works.
I think some of that comes from this belief that we have all this goodness inside of us and it's already there, rather than people need to be taught to be good. Your parents teach you how to behave, and we get values from somewhere. They just don't pop up into our head. If you look innately, humans are selfish creatures, and we have to be taught to be kind and giving and moral. Those are taught things, not innate, as much as some people want to think that they aren't. And you have to be taught them somehow.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have that fatherly figure in your life. And unfortunately, you don't see that as much anymore. And that doesn't have to be just the dad unit. It can be someone who's more uncle that's really close by, or someone in the church that's that role model. You have to have that key role model. And I think a problem we see these days is that women were, the current generation was raised where you can do it all on your own. I don't believe that you can be both roles.
Yeah.
And for teaching a child, I don't think you can be that motherly instinct as well as the fatherly masculine instinct at the same time. You can't teach both. You need to have two role models for each side, both equally important. But I think that if you're not going to get that through podcast or whatnot, what needs to happen is that people need to focus on making sure that there's both the masculine and feminine roles in growing our future generation and having those important role models in your lives.
We were talking earlier about some misconceptions, and one of them is that men somehow set the bar higher for women than they do for themselves. And that's actually in one of these articles here that I printed, that we make it more difficult for women to attain the same equality that we have. Or it's harder for them to bust the glass ceiling in the corporate world. But again, I go back to some of the things that differentiate us, and there are some things, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it, that women cannot do. And there are some things that men cannot do. And I do not think that we raise the bar higher for women. I think there are just some bars that they're incapable of climbing over. So I want to talk about the military for a second.
I was just about to bring this up.
Here we go. Yeah, I don't have a problem with female fighter pilots. I don't think that there's anything about that situation that where a man would be better than a woman. But in hand-to-hand combat, there's a difference in physical structure. So if you had even two people of a man and a woman of equal weight, there is still a difference in the way a man is structured versus the way a woman is structured, and the man would have an advantage by having wider shoulders, bigger arms. And so I think that it's...
when I watch these superhero shows, I see some of these women beating up the Hulk and Captain America. I'm not so sure you're right there. I mean, TV's showing me that it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I think it's more than just physical. Look at the Navy SEALs. You don't have females in that. The test itself to become a SEAL is insane. But I had this conversation with my husband because at first I did have that thought of if a woman can pass the same test on a shoot test, they should be able to stand in combat right next to a man. But my husband brought up this fact of, okay, so let's say the female gets hurt. Right. You're not telling me that another man will go out of his way and put his life on the line to grab you to make sure you get off that line, or if it was another man next to him that he wouldn't be focusing on himself. Automatically, if you put 10 men and one female all in the same group next to each other, every single man is going to put himself in front of that woman in the line. So his focus is not going to be straight to the enemy right away. It's going to be protect her, and then the second thought is going to be the enemy.
That's interesting.
Right.
So personally, yes, can you make the shot? Sure. That's not the point. The point is that the people on that line are going to be more concerned about you than the actual task at hand. And that ultimately will then hurt someone in the long run. So I don't think it's fully physically. Yes, men definitely can be stronger, faster, whatnot, 100%. 100%. But I think that's why women need to step out of those combat roles in the military, because automatically men like to be the leader, they like to protect, and they like to be that sheepdog. And if you are next to them, they're going to first want to protect you over either another person or themselves.
Or the mission.
Or the mission itself.
Yeah.
Which then hurts everyone.
Yeah. And that's the social interaction aspect of male-female relations. And we can try and neutralize that as much as possible, but it always exists in some point, in some way.
And I don't personally think, as a female myself, I don't think it would be vice versa. I don't think that one female would go out of their way to protect a certain male before that mission. It would be the mission first. That's my point of view on that one.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I disagree with that.
When I've read about flipped families like mine, and one thing I read that actually made a lot of sense to me was that it's a lot easier for a man to be a stay-at-home dad because they can develop that nurturing instinct. But it's a lot harder for a woman to become the disciplinarian. And if you're really going to flip the roles, then that's what ends up happening. And that apparently is very hard. And I believe that. I think I've seen that a little bit in art. I think it's been harder for my wife to be working all the time and not have as much time as she would have liked with the kids. And whereas I think with a man that focuses on his work and goal, it's not as much of a challenge. And so I think it's tougher on women to flip the family than it is on men, I think.
I would say the exception to that would be here in the show, because Lexi is a disciplinarian about time. And she says it's time for you to talk about the book.
Oh, yes. Okay. And so if you want to go find some traditional way of good behavior, I've got George Washington's Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior. It's a small book. Anybody could read this. And we've got it at the Boerne Bookshop.
Hey, folks, if you like what you hear on the show and you want to get some more of it, Dale and I would like to invite you to Whiskey and Wisdom, a new book club that started late last year, and we meet every other month.
And that would be the third Thursday of April, June, August, October, and December.
Please join us. We're going to have an assortment of whiskeys there and a great conversation about a very interesting book. Hope to see you there.
If you missed any of this and have to go back and listen to it again, then you can stop by the BoerneRadio.com and catch our podcast. And we will see you next week.